Hello. This is Sam of Adventures in Philology. I wanted to discuss today, is it worth it to do a Humanities PhD in 2025? Um, and the kind of cop-out answer, I guess, is it depends. But I would say yes under certain conditions. I've kind of made a video like this before, but I saw another video on this topic, so I thought I would do it again, and coming at it from the kind of my perspective of doing Islamic history or Middle East studies. But I think what I will discuss here is probably applicable to, if you're in the United States and you're doing any kind of like non-U.S. or non sort of Western, research. And I think for generally the answer is yes. If you're working on this kind of material or you want to really learn deeply about it, I would say, a university graduate program is the only place you can really deeply learn about this kind of stuff. And you can read the books on your own. That's certainly possible. It's much more easy. We live in the age of academia.edu, which is a lot of papers, for free, and Anna's Archive and Sci-Hub and things like that. But really, there's no substitute right now, I think, for the kind of experience that you get at a good graduate program. And what is that? Really, it's having the kind of master and apprentice relationship with a professor. Being able to work closely with one person, ideally several, and you receive feedback and they guide you, and they transmit what they know. And really, if you want to look at the Islamic world, this is, perennial sort of relationship, of the transmission of knowledge in this kind of line. And it's much the same, in the modern kind of university. There's things you just don't really get just reading on your own, and you really need, I think, that kind of guidance. So for that reason, I would say it's worth it if you really want that. That's one reason why it's worth it. The other reason is, to really learn about these other cultures, you kind of need to do serious language learning. And for now, for the most part, you can really only get that, at like a good university, especially if you want to read texts like what I do. I read, my research is mostly focusing on Islamic manuscripts, but you can really only get that kind of learning from a university environment. I know there's people now that have set up kind of reading groups online, and that's good, of course, but again, you really need that kind of one-on-one or small group instruction in person to learn to read kind of older sources, especially, but also more literary language if it's more even if it's more modern kind of material. You need that environment, I think, and again, that's something you can really only get at a university. Another reason why I'd say it's worth it is, you are paid. So, that's a misconception. I see a lot online that, I would do a PhD, but I don't have the money. If you get into a program at a research university, which, is not necessarily easy, but it's possible. You are paid, not very much, but if you're the kind of person that doesn't sort of need a lot to live, you're kind of have a modest, modest needs. It's doable, not the easiest, but I'll be the first to admit that. But it's doable. You are paid, and there's that. So. And one thing I will say, though, in terms of is it worth it, before you embark on this, is you need to understand what the purpose of this kind of education is. So on the one hand, it is a lot of reading books, but it's not really the point is just to read a lot of books. The goal is to learn the craft of being a scholar. What do I mean by that? It's to learn how to read, but also how to write, and how to come up with, your own original research. Now, if you like reading about a topic a lot, that's good, but that might not necessarily mean, doing a graduate degree is worth it for you. So, maybe you just try to get a master's. Those usually aren't funded, but if you wanted to try that, do a master's degree, see if you like that, and then, finish, and then at the end, decide if you want to continue, get a doctorate. But that's really the point, and I think that leads to people that don't have that understanding, or maybe they're never explained that clearly. I think that leads to a lot of burnout. I've kind of discussed this on a previous video, but I think that can lead to burnout. People that, they really like reading about, certain area of history, or, maybe they like a language, they speak it and they enjoy speaking it, but then, they get into, a program doing like linguistics, and they get burned out because, you're not there you're there with a kind of different focus. So if you have that kind of interest in writing, and you like writing, that's good, because I knew people in some of my, previous academic experience that really liked history, but, didn't really like writing papers, which seems kind of contradictory, but I sort of understand now better, like, where they were coming from. And that's okay to like something and not want to research, but, I think you run into problems when you get into it and you realize, oh, I actually don't like the scholarship part of it. I think the other thing, people will say, oh, you're writing a bunch of stuff that only 10 people will read. If that makes you uncomfortable, maybe it's not for you. That's never really bothered me. Because I am a kind of defender, in some respects, of the old Orientalist tradition. They were never very numerous in the 19th, early 20th century, and I'm talking about people like Ignaz Goldziher, Theodor Nöldeke, these kind of mostly German and Hungarian scholars. I mean, there was French and British ones as well. But, they were not really writing for a huge audience to begin with. But, they were very invested, and, that didn't really, I don't think that really stopped them from doing their work. And I don't think it should be a barrier necessarily, but for some people, it is. So if that doesn't really appeal to you, it might not be a good fit, and that's okay. Right. that's why I'm making this video, is mostly to try to explain some of this stuff and, explain, is this a good fit for you, or not, this kind of education. So another reason why I would say it's worth it is also just having access to a good research library. That's really worth it a lot. I mean, just being able to go and look around, especially in person. That's another thing why I think, the structure of the university and the kind of, social environment combined with the library is important, because that helps you find things that you wouldn't, be aware of otherwise. I can't tell you how many times I've been in a, research library where, I just go in there, I look around, and I find something that, I had no idea existed, or, having conversations with people, and then, they turn me on to something new, or, if it's a project I'm working on, that they're there to tell me, oh, did you look at this? And, in conjunction with the library, that's extremely valuable, and you can't get that just from, always reading, unless you're a really, really diligent reader. You check every footnote, and you're really systematic with your personal reading. That can be hard to do. The other thing I would say it's worth it is, you do have a lot of time to yourself. You do have to be a self-starter. You have to set your own schedule, but it is nice that, to not necessarily have like a 9 to 5 sort of schedule if you're a person with, more, let's say, like artistic temperament, where, you don't really like to work, in that kind of rigid way. That's nice. It's nice to be able to do that. Obviously, if you're a teaching assistant, you're going to have more things to do, but I would say that's a nice benefit. Because a lot of people, even if they like their job, I think, if you're a certain type of person, having to commute in a lot of cases, and then go to, a 9 to 5 job, and really a lot of places it's more like 8 to 4 now, or with, kind of unpaid overtime in certain cases, that can really, damage you. So, it's a trade-off. Obviously, you're not going to be making a lot of money on a graduate stipend, but, you do have a lot of free time, or, not necessarily free time, but you have a lot of latitude in the way you set your schedule, that can be, good for certain people. So I would say that can be worth it. And, the other thing is, you really, even, especially in, I would say, like, kind of, again, my sort of discipline of Islamic history, or, and associated kind of fields, you really are going to meet, like, the world experts on a lot of stuff if you get into a good program, or, even if they're not at your institution, you can, you have access to them much more easily than you would, just like emailing them or something, as like a member of the public. I think, like, scholars should kind of be accessible to a point, but, some people get really weird emails from strangers, or, I've been at university events where a member of the, non-university community comes, and they ask kind of weird, or sort of uncomfortable questions, so, but if you're a student, or, maybe you do get some kind of, academic job, that can be, good, because, you kind of have a way in to talk to people. Another thing why you should do it, Well, here's what I would say why you should not do it is if you go into it with the idea that you want to be a professor, that is a common, I think, pitfall of a lot of people is to enter a PhD program and, the goal is not um, doing, I'm entering this program because I really enjoy, you know, uh, Turkish philology, just to talk about myself, use myself as an example. I really enjoy pre-modern, Turkish philology. So, the university is like the way to do this. That's the way to do this. A lot of people go into it with another, intention of I want to be a professor, and they often maybe don't really have a good idea of like why they want to do that or what they think it's about. And the job market, academic job market, is not good, and people should be cognizant of that. But if that's the overriding concern, I think that's maybe you need to look at like what your priorities are. Are you using like a graduate program as a vehicle to kind of explore like an interest you really have and you want to work on, or do you want to be a professor, capital P, that's like your kind of identity is bound up in that. And being a faculty, if you do get that kind of position, I'm certainly a long way from that, but you have to also recognize that comes with a lot of responsibility, and it's not really about you at that point. It's about transmitting the knowledge that you've been given to another generation. So obviously, people should publish and write books and stuff like that. But it's if you're in that mode, it's not really about you anymore. In a way, it should be about the students, ideally, although not a lot of academics don't think like that, but it's not really about you at that point. You're kind of responsible to those that came before you, those that taught you directly, and then the people that taught them, and then to your students. So ideally they can go on and do the same thing and carry forth this kind of knowledge. This is like in Sufism, you have the silsila, the tariqat that goes forward. This is perhaps not as spiritually profound as those kind of traditions, but it's a similar structure and kind of similar goal in some ways. So if you can think like that, maybe then, or you're predisposed to thinking like that, then maybe a humanities PhD is good for you. Another reason why I think it's good, especially if you work on kind of an area study type discipline, it does give you a lot of time to travel a lot and to meet a lot of make friendships. I know I certainly would not give up the friendships I've made through my academic path for a job. Maybe that's a little corny, but it's given me a lot of very good experiences and given me a lot of very good friendships that I hope I have for the rest of my life. Another thing sort of related to this is are academic qualifications still good, useful or valid? Yes, and but it's not really the degree itself. There's still a useful heuristic. I was listening to a philosopher talk about this, and I'm going to repeat kind of what he said because I think it's spot on. Is like, it's not really about someone being doctor in something. It's that, okay, they went to this institution, they studied under these people that are authorities, and they said, this person is competent to work in this field. That doesn't mean they're necessarily right, or that, they're the smartest person ever, but it means that, okay, they know the material, ideally, they know the material, they can engage in these discussions, and they have kind of a baseline of competency. And for that, I think, it's still the only metric to really judge someone. And again, this is where the responsibility kind of part of it comes in, is like, if you have a doctorate and you're not very competent in your field, well, that kind of makes you look bad. That doesn't mean the notion of a degree is worthless or something like that. I think a lot of people now have kind of gone too far in a lot of respects with that. There's incompetent people in every type of job ever. So I guess, to kind of sum up, is it worth it? Should you do it? And maybe this isn't very satisfying, but it really depends on your priorities and your kind of temperament. If you're in it to get a job as a professor, I would say, if that's your only interest, I would say it's probably not good. It's not a good fit. But if you are interested in, if you like writing and the actual like craft of scholarship, I would say yes. If you see a graduate education as an opportunity to develop yourself, and you're using it as a vehicle to grow as a person, and grow in knowledge, then I would say yes. So it's a matter of your temperament and priorities. And again, maybe that's not a super satisfying answer, but I hope maybe this is helpful. And finally, I would just say again, if you're working especially on non-Western languages, I would say it's still extremely beneficial to at least try a graduate education. Again, if you're really interested in something, non-Western languages and cultures, and you're in the United States, I think that the university is really one of the few places you can get a good level of knowledge in these areas, short of you go to, go to live in the Middle East for a long time and do it like that. I mean, that's possible too. But if you want some kind of structured education and the opportunity to do a lot of that travel, I would say that's, a graduate education gives you kind of the time and the funding to do that, because, if you're working a 9-to-5 job, it can be really tricky and to do that. So I hope, maybe someone out there finds this helpful. And if you, if you do, I hope, I wish you good luck, and thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you all in the next video.